Hello.
How are
Very
you?
you doing well. All right. So what you're gonna do is click on your icon, and there you go. Yes, camera. All
There
right.
we
So
are.
let's split this. Let's expand. Oh, wait. Oh no! Now you have the full thing. Wait. I want it to expand both. Let me do this the right way. Shrink, expand, gift, microphone, cam, shrink. Oh wait, what's this? Why? It won't let me expand both. Hmm. I wonder why. Normally it lets me. Expand one spot first. I've expanded that. Okay, and now let's do. Ah,
One or
there you
the
go.
other.
Got it. Got it.
There we go.
Yes.
Hi there.
Wonderful. Hello. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing good, thanks. How you doing?
I am very happy now that I get to talk to you because I've wanted to,
Yeah,
have you on my
finally.
live stream for a while. I love your content. It's great. I mean, I normally don't like listening to long lectures about law or civics, but you really do make it entertaining, and you really make me want to like just hear the next thing. So before we start this, everybody, listen. This is Brian. He's a former prosecutor. He gives civics instructions. And can you tell us your credentials?
Yeah. So I'm an attorney. I live in Washington D.C. I was actually sort of an accidental prosecutor. I was assistant attorney general in American Samoa, and we were a little bit light on staffing. And I was in the civil division, so I was supposed to be doing um, contracts and helping agencies and things like that. Much more, that kind of stuff. And our criminal side just got really light on people. And one morning, or well, there were only two flights a week in and out. And one night, our like one of our only prosecutors decided to just jump on the plane and disappear. And
Wow.
so the next morning, we get a call from the court. There's nobody there, and somebody takes a look and sees that his apartment's been cleared out. And so I just get a call. Like, it was just like, put on a tie and get over there. And I had very little courtroom experience. I
Ha!
had certainly never been. I had no experience in criminal law, and they said just get up there and figure it out. And so I did. And we did not get. I don't think we got any assistance. We tried a couple of times. I don't think we ended up getting any assistance for months. So I ended up being a prosecutor for quite a while. Um,
Wow.
and that was, quite. It was quite an interesting experience. I had to sort of make that work in my brain because I'm not. I wouldn't have chosen to be a prosecutor.
Yeah.
Uh,
You
and I
just
had to.
literally fake it till you make it.
Well, yeah, and also, I had to speak. I used to work for Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Hmm.
I'm not someone who likes sending people to jail for things, and they had really draconian drug policies over there, which didn't make me feel very good. And so I had some conversations with friends of mine back here, and was like, okay, how do I make my brain work with this,
Yeah.
and or how do I settle this? And one of my friends who also worked for SSDP had a good conversation with me and said, "Look, somebody's going to do this job. Like, you guys have a constitutional obligation. People can't just sit in jail without charges. So somebody's got to do this. It
Yeah.
can either be somebody who is just hell bent on getting as many people in jail as possible,
Yeah.
or you can go in there, try to make sure everybody is treated as well as they can be treated, make sure that they get all the due process that they deserve, make sure that they're if possible you get diversion programs or anything like that. He was like, you go in there with that as your primary goal, and I would much rather see you in that position than anyone else. And I was like, okay, I can work with that.
Yeah.
So I was a prosecutor for I mean, solidly for a good 4 months. Thank you for the hat.
Thank you
Solidly
for the
for a
hat.
good 4 months or so, and then kind of intermittently, off and on, afterwards. For a few weeks here, a month there. while I was doing, but I still had to do my other job too. So
As the Assistant Attorney General to American Samoa.
yeah. So and well, so all of the everybody's in AAG. We're all assistant attorney generals, whether you're assistant attorneys general, whether you're in the criminal or civil division.
Okay.
I was in the civil division, and I was the deputy chief of the civil division. Um, and then I then would have to go over and work in the criminal division as well as, but I was an AAG on either side.
What did you
Um,
do after? Like what are you doing now?
well, I I came back. I had a really good, great job working actually as a tax attorney, um, and working with nonprofits.
Okay.
And I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want anybody tracking down what I was doing. But I basically, well, it just didn't end up being a great job for me. Partially, I didn't like the organizations we were working with, um, and I didn't. It just wasn't a great fit. So I did that
Why
for a little while.
let me ask this. Why are you teaching us about civics? Like
Okay.
why have you really went onto this crusade to let us know our constitutional rights and how we can use civics?
Okay. So our whole system is, we have a system based on uh, consent. Way back when, we basically had 13 little kingdoms here that decided we consent to join together and form this country.
Yes.
And so, unlike basically any other country that had existed at that point, there is no sword hanging at the back of our system to force anybody to follow this. And it's been sort of a surprise, I think, when people find out, what happens if the president doesn't follow what the Supreme Court says? And the answer is we don't know, because this is sort of the first time we haven't had a king at the back of this,
Yeah.
with with
I,
God's hand in one hand, and an army in the other to enforce our system.
yeah.
Um, what we have instead is this agreement that we're all going to agree to this, we're all going to stick to these rules, and an agreement that all of us are going to hold the people up there accountable
Mm.
if they don't. And we've stopped holding them accountable, in part because I don't think everybody knows when they're starting to deviate from the rules, and in part because I think people have forgotten that they're supposed to hold them accountable
But
and how much power they have.
Didn't Andrew Jackson say something like this to the Supreme Court? I forgot exactly,
Yes.
but they did some kind of ruling, and Andrew Jackson said, "Okay, enforce it,"
Yep.
and they
There
couldn't.
there have been two times that a president said has basically told the Supreme Court no. And it's funny. I went on kind of a dive looking for a lot of, I was expecting to see a lot of writing on those, and there isn't a lot on them, and I was really surprised by that. And I think it's because we just don't know.
We don't know, or we didn't want this really echoed in history.
Both. But I think both times we just we were like, okay, this happened once. We just kind of let it go and hoped it wouldn't happen again.
Yeah,
And it's only happened twice. One time was just pretty blatant, just
yeah,
and
Andrew Jackson. Yeah.
and one time was during a war.
Well, was that FDR?
No, that was so FDR said he would do it, but then he didn't have to,
Oh yes,
because
yes, I remember that. You made a post about this.
yeah. No, the other one was habeas corpus,
Oh,
during
Abraham
the
Lincoln.
Civil War, Abe Lincoln. Um,
Suspension of
and
habeas corpus. Yes. Okay, I remember that.
and so and the question is, and there is some legal question about exactly where the line is and who controls habeas corpus. Um, I don't think there really is, but whatever. at least people were, I think, able to sort of justify that one away. You know,
Got it.
and
Yeah, well, because there was a war. I mean, there was a
yeah,
civil war. I want to interrupt. So everybody, this is Brian. He and I were both content creators, and he's already given his credentials. But I just want to say, support Brian. Give him a follow. Follow him on all his platforms. Follow me on all my platforms, especially YouTube. Brian, are you on YouTube?
I'm on YouTube. Yep.
Follow him on YouTube, and also I use Patreon. If people want to directly support me, like please feel free to do a very simple subscription. Brian, do you have any subscriptions or anything?
I have I have on TikTok. I am doing very plain law
Yeah.
with nothing else. You can support me on my Substack, but I'm giving a little bit more context on Substack, a little bit more opinion on Substack. So if you don't want to hear my opinions, which I'm totally fine with, you can subscribe here. And I've also got in my link tree a bunch of other ways you can just, I've got like an Amazon wish list, which has stuff that I need
Oh, that's a good
and things like
idea.
that. Yeah, that's been really helpful. Um,
Oh, that's so smart. Okay, I'll do that.
things from food and stuff like that down, and snacks, whatever, to like I print stuff out on different colored paper to keep it organized because I've got paper everywhere.
Yeah, you're a lawyer.
Yeah, and so and I'm printing out all these cases for these videos I'm doing, and so I've people have been sending me reams of different colored paper. So I just put things like that in my wish list, and that's been really helpful.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you so much for that gift, strong man. All right, so then let's talk about what's going on now. Like, didn't I know because I've been reading so much about what's going on with Ukraine and kind of like just trying not to get too depressed. But the Supreme Court denied Trump on Monday. What was that about? Was that about the dismissal of the federal employees?
So I am not totally sure because I started a series, like a 5 video series that was on procedural due process and on people getting fired from their jobs. And it like I have been so buried in trying to
Yeah,
write and shoot and edit that
yeah.
since about last Wednesday that like I it's like all I've done. I kind of have to put blinders on
Yeah.
or I'm very easily distracted. So I know there was something that came out and I apologize. Like I part of my goal for this morning was to get up and catch up on everything, and I did a little bit, but not enough apparently. Um, so I am not sure exactly what the new
All right.
decision was.
And let me ask a different
If you
question.
can hum a
So,
few bars, I can probably.
what was that?
I said if you can hum a few bars, I can probably.
Oh no, because
Pull it up.
I've been buried too. I just know that that the Supreme Court ruled against Trump, and it's interesting because we have such a conservative Supreme Court. You know, a lot of them were Trump. Well, not a lot, but enough of them were Trump appointees, or they were just very uber conservative, like complete and total sellouts, like Clarence Thomas. Um, and the fact that they've ruled against Trump that really encouraged me to be like, oh my gosh, maybe rule of law can still persist in this country. And that's my question to you is like, is rule of law actually under threat with a Trump presidency, or are people just kind of, including myself, are we just letting our fears get the best of us?
So yes and no. First of all, one thing that you always have to know, and I always forget this number, but it's every time I look it up, I am always surprised by how high it is. The number of Supreme Court cases that are unanimous is unbelievably high,
Okay.
like 80s, 90s.
Wow.
Um, so most of the time, the conservatives and liberals are on the same side because most cases are just decided on really easy, strict interpretation of the law.
Okay.
So we hear about
Thank you, H-Man. I'm
the
listening.
exciting ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but most of the time, they're just sticking to the law. So really, a lot of it isn't as
Dire.
exciting as we think or as dire as we think. That said, I think that one of the biggest like first big breaks in kind of our responsibility as Americans to hold. Well, the first big break by the to just a the first big completely ignoring the structure of the Constitution
Yeah.
at the highest level was Mitch McConnell overriding the hearings for Merrick Garland.
Oh my God. Yes.
I think there have been some bad decisions made over time, but was that was so fundamental to how our system is supposed to work that you know that justices are supposed to come in um, kind of at somewhat random times and it's you're not supposed to be able to get an ideological pure court
Yeah.
through political gamesmanship like that. And he knew that. And that violation feels like, if anything, was really just ignoring the rules. That was it. And at that point, Americans should have really just raised up their hands and been like, all right, I don't care which side we're on. You guys are throwing you're throwing the whole system away.
Mm.
Uh-uh. And I think that's where I realized like that we needed a civics lesson. That's where I realized that we all needed to understand how this is all supposed to work, so that we start to recognize it and we all know when to stop playing one side or the other, stop playing our teams, and start remembering that we're all on one team.
Can I
Um,
interject with something?
yeah,
See, I think there are sensible Americans, millions of sensible Americans who agree with you. But there are a lot of unsensible Americans who voted for Trump the first and second time, and they think that the system was already thrown away long before Mitch McConnell made his denial. You know what I mean? Like they have been fully convinced that the system is working against them and that corruption runs rampant and that due process or actual rule of law was thrown to the wolves a long time ago. So what do you say to those people? Like,
I say to those people that you stop learning. You weren't paying attention to what was supposed to be going on and what was going on, and someone was telling you that something was going on that wasn't supposed to be, and you didn't bother to sit down and learn what was supposed to be going on and what was.
well, they weren't bothering because, and again, I agree with you, but I'm trying to play the devil's advocate. It's very
Yeah.
difficult for me. But these people, and it's generally the working class Americans. Um,
Who don't have time? I get it.
yeah, they not only don't have
Busy.
time, they don't have time. They feel like they've just been crapped on and nothing works. I
Yeah.
think during the Great Recession, when they saw these banks get bailed out by the handful and millions, hundreds of thousands of homeowners lose everything, I think that was the breaking point for a lot of Americans.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, okay, this system doesn't give a damn about me. Screw it all. And I think that led to this huge decline in the faith of our system. So it's not even about having time. It's a very open demoralization that these people feel. And even though, you know, um, so these people feel abandoned, and then what what galvanized them was that there's a billionaire saying, "Hey, you guys are being treated unfairly," even though everything he has done has
Yeah.
actually been more for the people who are in the top 1%. I mean, like Donald Trump, he said he was going to lower prices and that he was going to, make the country more money and get rid of the debt, but then he cut taxes by the corporations from 35% to 21%, and we had the largest spike in our deficit during that time. And one of the reasons why we are still like, even during the Biden administration, we still had, this consistent deficit was because of those tax cuts, because the
Right.
government had to keep borrowing to make up for the lack of revenue due to those corporate tax breaks. So you have these people, they don't know any better. They're just hearing a billionaire tell them that they're right.
But I think that the more now, I'm putting drops in a bucket.
Yeah.
But I feel like the more this is stuff that probably should have started 20 years ago, but the more information that you have, the easier very slowly, easier it becomes to recognize when someone is lying to you.
Okay.
Um, and that's my point, is that I kept seeing blatant lies,
Yes. Same
and
here.
and
Same
I
here.
I recognized them as lies, but I also realized that there was so much information, like, for me to explain. Well, why is it a lie? Well, all right, sit down for an hour and a half and let me explain to you why it's
Yes.
a lie. And so what I decided to do instead was take that hour and a half and break it up into 30 videos
Yeah.
so that I can start. I don't have to make partisan videos. All I'm going to do is slowly start making what would have been that hour and a half lecture, on just what I learned in the first month of law school. That would have, if everybody had known, they would have recognized at least some of these things
Yeah. Yeah.
as patently untrue, and some of these promises as impossible,
Yeah.
as just not compatible with our system of law,
Sure.
and why they weren't compatible with our system of law, and why we don't want them to be compatible with our system of law.
So what you said, okay, you mentioned Mitch McConnell overriding, the approval of Merrick Garland. All right. So what else? Like, what other stretches of the foundations of our system of law are you witnessing? Like, were there any under the Biden administration?
I think, as a general rule, um, Biden tested the system like everybody does,
Hmm.
but when the system said no, he tried something else, which is how the
Every,
system is
every
supposed to
president.
work.
Yeah, you check the cage holds true. You go, okay, fine, I'll go over here.
And I think the biggest complaint about Biden was that he didn't push things hard enough. But I
Yes.
think that's why he was chosen. And if you think back to 2020, when people were sort of shocked that he came out on top, or 2019, whatever it was, whatever year the actual election happened, I think people were really shocked when he came out on top. And I think the reason was that he was sort of this image of kind of stability, a little milk toast, a little, after 4 years of Trump, they kind of wanted somebody who wasn't going to shake anything, and
Yes.
who was just going to kind of stabilize for a little bit. And I think that he did. I don't think he pushed things too far, but and a lot of people didn't like that. Um, but at least from that perspective, I don't think he wasn't a boat rocker.
So I just want to add this to you, that now I campaigned for Biden and Kamala Harris, but now that the election's over, I actually didn't like Biden very much. I just saw him as a better option. I saw him as a safer option to the alternative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and especially now that what's going on with Ukraine, I really do loathe Biden, and I also loathe what Obama did. Like, they could have stopped this much earlier. They could have stopped Russia dead in their tracks, and I think both Biden and Obama were cowards, and their cowardice led us to this, led us to what's happening in Ukraine now. Um, but personal opinions aside, what's going on in this current administration that you would consider to be the greatest stretch of the foundations of our democracy?
It's hard to tell yet, because so much of it is, um it's hard to tell what's throwing spaghetti at the wall and what's actually, so many things happen and then they immediately pull them back.
Yes.
And um I know that part of their kind of political plan
Yeah.
is to create so much chaos that you don't notice what's really going on.
Yes. So
We know that.
so then, is there anything going on with Elon Musk and Doge that is a blatant violation of what our Constitution stands for?
Well, and I like to say it's only constitutional once the Supreme Court says or it's only unconstitutional once the Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional. I can make guesses, but I don't have a black robe, so it kind of doesn't matter what I say. But as a general rule, um, we have the separation of power. The separation of powers is a really big deal,
Yes.
and
Those are in the Articles of the Constitution, not the
yeah,
Bill of Rights, but right above. So the
yes,
Articles of the Constitution, like you said, that's the separation of powers, correct?
yes. Well, so that federalism that separates the articles from the amendments, and then the separation of powers separates Article 1 from 2 from 3,
Okay.
more or less.
So Article 1, 2, and 3 are like the executive, Congress, and the Supreme and the judicial, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and it's a little bit complicated because the judiciary is most of the judiciary is actually set up by Congress through Article 3, but whatever, neither here nor there. So the separation of powers is, you've got the legislative branch, and then you have the executive branch, and then you have the judicial branch, and they've all got their own lanes, and there is a philosophy to legislation, and the power of the legislature, because unlike the executive, where the philosophy of the executive is that when you want something done, the best way to do that is to have one person in charge of it.
Yes.
If you have 20 people in charge of getting one thing done, it's harder to do. So our doing branch has one guy in charge of it.
Spearhead.
Yeah. Um, but that is not who we want making our decisions. We are a representative democracy. We want us making our decisions. So we each send somebody to the legislature, and they collectively make the decisions for us, for our government. They write the laws. And so the laws are supposed to be what drive the machine. Or, yeah, I'm going to
Yeah,
lose
so
my metaphor.
Congress makes the laws, they introduce a bill, becomes a law, and then even if it becomes a law, the Supreme Court can say this is unconstitutional.
But the keep in mind, so the first government we had, the Articles of Confederation, was just a legislature.
Yeah.
They didn't have anything else.
Yep.
And so when they went to this one, they were like, all right, yeah, legislature, most important thing, but we'll also have an executive and a judiciary to
Sure.
operate and whatever. But the legislature is the most important branch
Yes.
because it's the most connected to the people.
Yes.
This is a government of the people, yada, yada, yada. So it has all of this power,
Yeah.
to decide what the government's going to do. And it is well, it wasn't originally allowed. Now it's given a little bit more flexibility to create these kind of sub powers of itself and put them into the executive branch to operate. So these agencies, these little things, they're part of the legislature that have been kind of um, delegated over to the executive branch to operate, but
Yeah.
they are still powers of the legislature. And there was originally this non-delegation doctrine that said you're not allowed to do that, and that's been relaxed so that they can start having these agencies do work. But the
Were these
president,
agencies where is the wiggle room for these agencies to exist in our Constitution?
um, in theory, there is no wiggle room, but also they didn't really. The non-delegation doctrine isn't in the Constitution either.
Oh, okay.
So
I wanted to say something because
yeah,
you said we're a constitutional no, right? Is that what you said? A constitutional democracy or
representative democracy. Yeah,
we're a
we have
representative
we
democracy?
send representatives on our behalf.
We're a representative democracy, but are we also a republic?
We are. Um,
So how would I categorize it? We are a republic. We are a type of republic that we call a representative democracy, or is a
well,
representative democracy a republic?
I find that the word republic and the word democracy change depending on who's using them.
Mm,
As a general rule, the best way I've been able to hold it down is that a democracy seems to be strictly like there are 10 of us, each of us get one vote. Or if there are 500 of us, each of us get one vote. That's a purist democracy.
yes.
When you start setting up something where we choose some people or we set up a government on our behalf in any
Representative.
way, that becomes a republic.
Ah, okay.
Res public does the business of the people.
Okay.
It's an organization to do the business of the people on their behalf.
So, um, now
But
I
it changes. Every philosopher is like, this is what a republic is, and they've all kind of got slightly different definitions.
weren't the framers of the Constitution afraid of a pure democracy?
Depends who. Well, so this is the problem. Framers of the Constitution is a lot of people. Each
Sure.
one of them have their own opinion.
Let's say the main
And
ones like James Madison.
so Madison, I'm trying to remember. Madison is a Federalist.
Yeah.
So he is on. So that's the problem. Is some of them are on one side, some of them are on the other.
Yeah.
The anti-federalists think that the best way to run everything is to have as much power as possible set up in like
The state.
town meetings.
Yeah.
Well,
Like
really,
local
town meetings, because they think the best way to keep people informed, the best way to keep people educated, and the best way to keep people involved is to have them be making be voting every week.
Yes. Sure.
Um, and on the other end, you have the Federalists who want something a little bit more centralized, national, whatever. And neither one of them are right or wrong in their. Both of them, when you read their arguments, you're like, okay, I guess this makes sense. Because it would be really hard to try to keep track of hundreds of town meetings and get anything done.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, you lose you lose track of what people want when the less you have them involved, and we see that now. People, the less involved they are, the less they know what's going on, etc.
But
So
there are a lot of people. There are people who are very involved. They're just usually older, and they want things to go back. So
yeah,
they're involved. It's just the wrong people are involved.
also very true. Yeah. So it's there wins and losses, but that's saying the founding fathers, you end up with, there's so many different people, they all have their own opinions, and it gets tough to track them, because that's one of the problems is like trying to keep track of all these people when they're all like, I even thought for a while I'd figured out like sort of a north-south divide, and then it turns out that like Sam Adams and Thomas Jefferson had like the same idea, so we're a Bostonian and a Virginian, like, so I was totally wrong on that one.
Well, it's interesting. I remember I made a post about this a few months ago, where like a lot of people, they complain about the electoral college system because they feel like it doesn't give proper representation, and I was reading about how there were choices. There was either everyone just votes, okay, or like for president, like you give it to everyone. That's one, and then the other system was Congress would vote for the president, and then the other was the electoral college system.
Yeah.
And people say that, oh, the electoral college system was built to preserve slavery, but the states that vehemently opposed the electoral college system were South Carolina, Georgia, I think Virginia. These states that were heavily so intermeshed with slavery, because they wanted Congress to vote for president, because they didn't think that the masses deserved to have any kind of chance at voting for the president.
This is whenever an answer to one of these questions seems simple,
it's not.
Probably wrong. Yeah.
So another question, people, you probably hear this too, because it's so common. People say that, well, the American Republic is failing, we're declining just like the Roman Empire. And I mean, one thing is, I know Rome was a republic until 50 BC.
Yeah.
All right. They were still an empire for another 450 years.
Yep.
So I just think it's like, people like to draw parallels to something that was once great and is no longer around, but it was a completely different world. The world was a completely different place 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
How much different? It's an improper parallel.
Yeah. I would say that, and not only that, but the Roman Republic didn't exactly didn't give voting rights to that many people. I mean, we're romanticizing some.
Oh yeah. You know why America does it? It's because the Romans were white, That's really, it really is what it is. A lot of guys are like, oh, well, we were powerful. It's kind of like why a lot of like, let's just say, less informed Americans gravitate towards Russia because they view
Yeah.
Russia as this like last white bastion of strength, and they don't realize that Russia is a very intermingled society. They're like 20% of the population is Muslim.
Yeah. It's well, and Russia, uh, Russia is not someone I would want to emulate
Yeah,
for a lot of reasons. Like over their entire hit, I mean, it's a
just recent history, not even the past 100 years, the past 500-600 years.
it is it's never been a fun place. Um, it's never been a place where people are really happy. It's a place where people are cold and surviving and getting eaten by bears.
And
It
drunk,
is,
and they're
uh,
they're just drunk to stay warm,
yeah,
and the water's not like the vodka's not poisoned. You
yeah.
know?
It's it's a rough place, and so but it's funny that you bring up Russia because one of my favorite metaphors, or metaphor, whatever it is, I stole this directly from. Did you ever see Chernobyl, the miniseries?
Yes, several
Um,
times.
there was first of all, I thought I picked up some really interesting things. I know it's not real, but from Russia or about Russia from that. But one thing in particular that stuck with me was there's a scene where this guy is walking along. He realizes he's being followed, and he goes to speak to one of the higher ups of the KGB, and he says, I'm being followed, and the guy says, of course you're being followed, and the people who are following you are being followed, and the people who are following them are being
I've been
followed.
followed.
The
Yes.
Soviet Union is a circle of accountability.
Yeah.
And I realized, yeah, if you're going to have a system that is not like ours, a system by consent, then you have to force everyone to follow the rules. And there has to be
Yeah.
a constant method of enforcing accountability. And I don't want that.
Yeah. Same.
And I don't think anybody realizes how little they want that. When they
Agreed.
start complaining about the lack of accountability, it's like, yeah, but do you realize what that means?
Speaking of accountability, this is interesting. So, when the Soviet Union was about to collapse, there was a vote passed, I believe, like the referendum in 1991. I think it was March of 1991, where the people of the Soviet Union were asked, hey, do you want to preserve the Soviet Union, but you guys but the countries get their own autonomy, but you're still part of this? And overwhelming people said yes. But then that was too extreme for the hardline communists because they didn't want more autonomy for the other countries. So that's when they tried a coup, I believe in August.
Yeah.
And after that coup, Gorbachev realized, okay, we're done. It's done. It's never going to work. We can't actually do this. And then the countries they declared their independence, and the Soviet Union was no more. And then the vote was given after that, and it was overwhelming in every single country that they wanted to break away from Russia. They wanted nothing to do with Russia. And the reason why is the KGB disbanded. The KGB was no longer able to surveil people, and it wasn't just the KGB spying on people. The KGB had informants to the point where I believe 1 in 30 people were some kind of informant. And once that was gone, the votes went the other way.
Wow.
Right?
Well, and that's kind of what I imagined was that sort of
Yeah.
everybody was spying on each other because
Yes.
that's the only way to make every single person comply with a regime that
Yes.
is authoritarian.
Yes. Yeah, and do you think we've taken baby step towards that with this new administration, or are we still fine within the laws of our constitutional republic?
I don't think within a month or two we have. I think that they would potentially if given the opportunity.
Yes.
Um, the thing that I think that we tend to the American system tends to rely more on market-based approaches. Um, and I frankly am a fan of it always sounds worse than it is, but the market-based approach, where instead of forcing somebody to do something, you find a way to make it more appealing to do that
Yes.
thing. And you just disincentivize the other thing. Um, and I think it's just generally all around, whenever possible, if I'm being asked how to do something, I try to find a solution that just disincentivizes the other thing. And I think as a general rule, that's the way we tend to approach things rather than forcing things. Now, right now, yeah, they've made a bunch of quick changes that change the language on things and whatever, but none of them are. They're all government. None of them have any power over the private sector. The executive orders don't reach beyond the executive branch, and they actually, as they're going to eventually find out, they don't even reach into most executive agencies because
Yeah.
executive agencies are usually created through the legislature.
I just want to say something. Everyone, don't ask to join. This live stream is just between me and Brian. Like, I mean, like, he's an actual expert in the field, and the point of this live is to get his pure, unadulterated information. If anyone, if you are like, if you even if you are an expert in your field, request to join privately, not during this live stream. Sorry, go ahead.
That's right. Um, so yeah, I think that they I think that I'm not sure that the Trump has realized yet how limited in scope an executive order actually is.
Sure, he does. He was the president 4 years ago.
Well, but I don't think anybody ever tells him. He's kind of a toddler. Like nobody tells him when his stuff doesn't work.
I know, but Jesus Christ, I know you're right. I just can't,
Um,
I just can't believe this is where we are.
so, um, but this time you have a couple other people like Musk, who has not been through this before, is trying a bunch of things because he doesn't know yet either, and he thinks he's CEO, and he's fine. He's going to find out that he's not, and that all of these things are not. None of them are going to go through. Um, but
Okay,
it takes
if
a
they're
little time.
not going to go through, they're not going to go through. But I mean, Trump has appointed his people in key military positions. He's appointed his people in key intelligence positions. So
And
who's
that some of
really?
that stuff is going to do some damage to us militarily.
Yeah,
It's going to do some damage to us in the intelligence community. It
yes,
may end up with us getting attacked.
yes.
That's real. That
So
sucks.
so the
But
the
as
thing is,
far as my area of expertise, as far as actually damaging our constitution, I'm not sure that they've actually done
but
anything.
But Brian, what's to stop him if he has people in the key, if he appoints his own gatekeepers, what can stop him?
Uh, these um, this whole thing is set up in a way that he's only allowed to appoint certain people, and the people he's allowed to appoint don't actually have control over certain levers
Okay.
that would give him access to make some of the structural changes that he thinks he's making. Um, now,
Okay.
now, if the people in Congress let him get away with some of this stuff, or if he just starts ignoring Supreme Court orders, well, then we got a problem. But that hasn't happened yet, and so until it does, I'm waiting to I'll jump off that bridge when I come to it. But
Jump off that bridge.
yeah, um, but
Yeah.
we're not there yet. It's just been a bunch of executive orders, which are orders to employees of the executive branch, which is kind of more limited than um, and even a lot of those have already been overturned. So
All right. How about this?
um,
I have another question for you. I don't know if it's really a legal question, but what I notice is when George Bush Jr. took office, the Democrats were saying, "My God, our constitution is in danger. We're collapsing." And then Obama gets elected, and now it's the Republicans who are saying there's tyranny, everything's collapsing, and it was, like they were really just like they spread the whole Tea Party movement, and then Trump gets elected, and I'm even like, holy crap, we're in trouble. This is a problem. And then Biden gets elected, and then of course you have the same idiots on the right who are saying the tyranny and everything is going to crap. And now here comes Trump. And it's I do feel like the left is saying the same thing, but to me it's really the boy who cried wolf.
So it just so happened that I was in law school during the beginning of the uh, Obama presidency,
Okay.
which was a particularly interesting time to be hearing these arguments and learning that they were false. And it's probably what created this desire in me to spread this information.
Okay.
Because as the the Tea Party movement grew on this wave of,
Ignorance.
well, and specifically not ignorant, not ignorance is not knowing the law. These were people who knew the law and were misrepresenting it.
So okay,
And
even
that
worse.
that did not sit right with me. These were lawyers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, because I'm sitting here learning this stuff and I'm like, this is just like, I'm learning the most basic stuff here. I'm still, like a first year law student. And what you're saying is just blatantly not correct. And you should know that.
Yeah.
And then as I got more into it and started to realize, oh, you do know that. Like, there's no way you don't know that. You're just lying.
Yeah.
And you are taking advantage of people who don't know that
Yes.
and leveraging the privilege you had to learn this stuff,
Yeah.
and leveraging your degree and their belief that because you have that degree you know what you're talking about, to take advantage of them. And that pissed me off. And so I actually started thinking about all of this in 2010. I just never came up with a way to
Combat
share
it.
it.
Share it.
I
Yeah.
mean, I would get drunk in bars and start lecturing people, but nobody was listening.
Same. I would
um,
I wouldn't get drunk, but like yeah, I've alienated so many coffee shops, so many discussions, so many parties. I've been that one guy going to like 11 people and just saying you're all just effing wrong. You have no idea what you're talking about. And what I notice is people on the extreme left, they don't care about facts either. They want to be in the echo chamber. Um, I see that with the extreme right, but
yeah.
it's not even the extreme right anymore. It's just regular people who are still supporting Trump. Like they don't care if something isn't true. Like, I had one person telling me that George Bush Jr. was a Democrat, was really a Democrat, and was just like pushing Democrat policies. And this same person said that Barack Obama was involved with George Bush Jr. in the early 2000s as to why we went into Iraq. Obama wasn't even in Congress.
Well,
You know,
it's funny. I
and
have
these are regular people who, they're like, well, what is that book?
this is Jeb Bush's Immigration Wars book,
Okay.
um, Forging an American Solution, where he talks about like coming up with a balanced and fair and humanitarian solution to immigration law that he wrote in, what year is this? Um, 2012, maybe something like that. Uh, that is where the Republican Party was in 2012.
13 years ago. That's not too
Um,
long ago.
and that was the conservative take on
Yeah.
this. So, this is how things have changed. Um, and this is where how things have shifted over the past in that time period.
But
So
this shift, Brian, this shift isn't just something that happened in 4 years or 12 years. I mean, I think this shift has been taking place for like 4 decades or longer.
well, this shift was planned. This shift was very well, this is a Gingrich. They sat down and scheduled this whole thing out.
Through that,
Um,
Reagan, like when Jimmy Carter was like on his way out, that's really what I think started happening because it was Reagan who just he put so much deregulation, like put us so behind when it came to solar energy and like no longer depending on the Middle East for oil. He took apart our educational system, took away so much funding. He put hundreds of thousands of insane people on the streets because he shut down the institutions. It just, I mean,
so this has been a long, slow move, but I think that Gingrich is where we started the. Well, maybe it was Reagan, but I always think of Gingrich as being the beginning of the um, the real the plotting of a new structure to how they were going to approach um, power over ideology.
okay,
Uh,
okay.
and so there are things like one of the stories that I am fascinated by. It was a Gingrich policy um, that served two functions. They changed the congressional work week from 5 days to 4 days. And the reason it served two functions. First, uh, it allowed all of the congressmen and women to fly home for the weekend, which meant that they were campaigning Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But the other big thing that it did was it allowed them to leave their families back home. Whereas before, they would move their families to Washington, D.C., and
Mm,
they would buy or rent a house, usually in Northern Virginia. And there'd be these whole neighborhoods in Northern Virginia that were filled with Congress people and their families. And what that meant is that on the weekends, when the kids had soccer games, the Republicans and Democrats had their kids playing soccer together. And at the PTA meetings, the Republicans and Democrats had to, you know, figure out who was bringing Rice Krispie treats. And that really changed the way that things worked on Monday morning. When they changed the work week to that 4 day work week, and this was the second function of that, they were able to separate those people. And
wow.
they started getting these big houses on Capitol Hill for particularly the younger, less well to do Congress people to come in and basically have a room or a bunk bed to sleep in 4 days a week. Um, and only hang out with other Republicans. And so there's like one house called the C Street House it was just Republican representatives. They never talked to anybody else, and it cut down on these bipartisan agreements.
Wow.
And this was a Newt Gingrich policy in '94, I think, that really changed the way that Congress worked.
Holy cow, Brian. That's insane. That's insane. They
And
really they took more humanity out of politics.
and you talk to people here, and I live in DC. You talk to people here. I moved here in 2002, 2003, and I was a bartender for a long time. And so people talked about that for years, like how
Yeah.
the tone of this town changed after that. And people just got less friendly
Wow.
because they weren't talking to each other anymore.
Wow.
Um, I didn't even realize how early it had happened until pretty recently because I thought that the way people were talking about it in 2003, I thought it had happened like a month earlier. Um, but it apparently it happened like 10 years earlier, and people were just still talking about it all the time because it had had such a big impact on this town and on how things worked
Yeah.
in the house in particular.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's been the policy ever since. The C Street house, I believe, is still there. Um, and there's a couple other ones that's where they It's where they live, and their families now stay back home. And I think they even make it a kind of a campaign issue where they say, "Oh, a real congressman, a good congressman, spends as much time at home in their district as possible," um, which has never been true. It didn't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have made sense for the longest time because there was travel wasn't that easy. Um, they're supposed to be here. They don't. They're not supposed. They can't work at home.
Yeah.
They have to work here.
Yeah, because they are making decisions that affect the entire country.
Yeah, the work they do is all here. So, um, anyway, yeah, that was one of those. That story has always been, I thought, really interesting.
So we have a couple more minutes, like 3 more minutes. Is there anything you want to say, like that you didn't get to address during this conversation? Is there any point you want to make?
Yeah, I don't think we're out. I do think that I do believe at least the number one thing I could do was to teach people as many things as possible. But I think that learning stuff is important. I think that the understanding the architecture of our Constitution is really important, and that your role, everybody's role in that architecture, is to talk to your representatives, talk to the people who you have sent to DC to represent you, and realize how much influence you have, even if they're not from your party. Um, and if they're not doing their job, then House of Representatives elections happen every 700 something days.
Yeah.
We are through a few of those days already. The next one is coming faster than you think. Either run for office or get ready to support somebody who is. If they're not doing their job, get rid of them. But also contact them in the meantime a lot.
You know what? Thank you so much for saying that, the architecture of the Constitution. I have never heard anyone coin that phrase. I'm sure someone else did, but you really introduced me to that notion of the architecture of the Constitution. I can't even describe what the heck it means, but I get it. But I know what you mean. Yeah, just like when you
Yeah.
talk about how the first three articles are, that's the delineation of powers, but most of it is an extension of kind of the legislative, right? The legislative branch.
Yeah.
And I just want to say another thing. So guys, 'cause I have to plug myself, and I'll plug you too.
Okay.
If you guys want to support us again, don't feel bad if you didn't see the entirety of this interview, because I'm gonna put it on YouTube in like a day or two, so you can watch the whole thing. And if you want to support us, just either follow me on YouTube, follow Brian on YouTube, and support me on Patreon for a small subscription. And go to Brian's link tree and look at his wish list of goods. That get him through. Because again, we do spend a lot of time working on content to educate you and make your lives better, and it's almost impossible to do it for free.
Yeah.
you know and Brian, thank you so much. This was great. This is such a good talk. I would love to do this again.
I think we
So
should. Yeah, this has been fantastic. So thank you very much. And I
I,
really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. So
time. Thank you guys. Guys, follow him, and thank you all so much. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
bye, guys.